And now we come to that section of scripture that every person that likes to drink alcoholic beverage will throw into the face of every Christian. Jesus turned water into wine. Well, we can't dance around the issue. It's very clear that it's there in scripture. In John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, we find Jesus had been invited to a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and that wine ran out, and his mother comes to him and tells Jesus that the wine has run out. Jesus kind of rebukes her, saying, "Mine hour has not come." We believe that means to start doing miracles, to start to reveal who he was. He was there with some disciples. We don't know if it was all of the 12 disciples or not. But we do know that Jesus honored his mother's desire to not have the couple embarrassed by being out of wine. And there were 6 stone pots which had been used for water to be used for purification, that is, for ritual washing before the ceremony. These stone pots were 20 to 30 gallons each. And with 6 of them, that means anywhere from 120 to 180 gallons of water were filled into these pots right up to the brim, it tells us. And then the waiters, or those that were working with Jesus, were told to draw some out and take it to the head waiter, or to the person that was in charge of the beverages and refreshments. And it's clear that it says that the person in charge of that called to the bridegroom and said, most people serve their best wine first, and then when people are already had too much to drink, then go ahead and serve the lesser quality beverage, so that nobody will fuss at the beginning of the wedding, and by the time they get to the end of the wedding, they don't care whether the wine's as good as it was, because they're under the influence. So what do we do with this? There are some theologians who don't study the languages and say that this was grape juice. I'd like to have believed that it was grape juice, but it probably wasn't, because the word that was used in the original language was one for fermented alcoholic beverage called wine. So does this mean that Jesus approves of the use of wine? Obviously not, because we can find 66 verses in scripture that talk about the dangers of alcohol. Does this mean that we should use this as approval on drinking wine? Well, let me just put this in perspective for you. I had opportunity to see a number of people that were alcoholics in my family, and also in friends of my family. It's not a pretty sight. So we know that the Bible gives adequate warning all through it about excessive drinking, addiction to alcohol. As a matter of fact, at one of the churches that I served, as a layperson, an alcoholic came, and he said the statistics clearly bear out that 1 in every 10 people who drink, even just socially, will have a life-changing event, at least in a related situation, because of alcohol. That is, health issues, accidents, automobile accidents, dividing families, doing things that they wouldn't have done without the influence of alcohol. 1 in 10 would have a life-changing experience, even if they were just social drinkers. And he said this: if there was a sign posted at St. Petersburg Beach in Florida that said 1 in every 10 people who go into this water will be attacked and bitten by a shark, how many of you would go swimming? If your odds were 1 in 10 of being bitten by a shark, how many of you would go in swimming? You see, that kind of puts it in perspective, doesn't it? Now, there are two passages of Scripture, this passage where Jesus turns water into wine, and the one where Paul says a little wine for the stomach's sake, are the only two passages that I see which give any clearance for the drinking of wine or alcoholic beverages. But I have the 66 passages of Scripture that warn me the dangers of alcoholic beverages and the chance of addiction, the chance of drunkenness, and making one a fool in front of others. And so I think it's very, very important that we look at everything from the beginning of Scripture to the end of Scripture. Levites were not to be drinkers. It said John the Baptist came in and would not drink wine. It tells us that the constant teaching was to be very careful not to become addicted to wine. The requirements for deacons and bishops were to not be addicted to wine, not to be heavy drinkers. So we see the dangers of alcohol, and to use this passage of Scripture to encourage people to drink wine or to drink alcoholic beverages or to take the chance of being one of those 1 in 10 that have a life-changing experience is a ludicrous and a very wasteful argument on behalf of alcohol. We need to remember that the Scriptures clearly teach, and I give you another text for you. This one is found in Romans 14, verse 21, and it tells us that we shouldn't do anything that's a stumbling block to our brother. If I can drink successfully for the rest of my life in moderation, I probably could, because there's nobody directly in my family, my bloodline of family, that's had a significant drinking problem. However, genetics shows clearly that if you do have someone that's been addicted to alcoholic beverages, then there's a good chance that you will be as well. So what did I say all of that to say? Well, because Romans 14 says in chapter 14, verse 21, it says not to be a stumbling block to anybody else. So if I sit down with a glass of wine in front of somebody who does have a problem and does overindulge and offer him a drink, I've become a stumbling block to him. Now, we need to be careful that we don't set a bad example, and we need to be sure that just because we don't drink, that we don't put that particular thing above all other things. A lustful mind, a bad temper, greed, a false sense of values, all of these things are just as bad as somebody that has an addiction to alcohol. So we want to be careful that we just because we don't drink, that we don't put this one above all other sins, all other things that God would frown on. But we should always make it clear that the Scripture clearly does not teach that drinking is good, that we should clearly teach that we shouldn't be a stumbling block to others, that we should clearly teach the dangers of overindulging and the example that it sets and the fool that it makes of us. And then let people make that choice if they want to, but recognizing the dangers and the very cause of some serious problems that could be a life-changing event in their lives. Did Jesus turn water into alcoholic fermented wine? I believe he did. Did he make it a high proof, that is a high alcoholic content? I don't think so. I would guess that it was probably not as alcoholic as any of the wine that had been served that day, because I think Jesus clearly knew the dangers of alcohol, and therefore, as they used to make a beer that was for servicemen that had almost no alcohol in it, I believe Jesus probably made wine with as little alcohol as you possibly could put in it and still have it taste like wine instead of grape juice. Nevertheless, I think it's very, very important that we continually tell people the dangers of alcohol, that we continue ourselves to abstain from drinking, even if it's for no other reason than to be a stumbling block to somebody that can't handle alcohol. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.